All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. It's exciting though because this is the first official lead team meeting that we have, and so I know that there are several of our lead team that can be here today. So that's why we're recording. And so, anyhow, wanted to share with you just something that I was listening to on Andy Stanley's leadership podcast. Something that I learned, and this week we had you guys submit your 7 goals, and I'm going to be shooting those to you in an email really soon. I've got a couple others that are getting those to me this week, and so as soon as I have those, I'll email those out to you. But there are things that we want to see in our lives fulfilled in 2015. And as I was looking over everybody's goals, I'm really excited because I think they're great. And of course, several of us had the opportunity over lunch to talk about those yesterday, and feel like those are attainable. And it was something that we're going to celebrate together in December as we go back and look and see, were we able to personally accomplish these things. And so what I'm going to talk about today encompasses that. It talks about our personal goals. And then we're also going to switch and talk like organizationally as a Bridge OKC, how we can meet those goals too. But I was reading a book, or actually heard this story, and I want to read this book it's called The Power of Habit, and it's by Charles Duhigg. And the cool thing is you can even listen to his TED Talk. And Charles Duhigg just recently won the Pulitzer Prize. And for a lot of it was because of this study that he did on the power of habits. And so he says that our minds form habits, and the reason why is because our mind wants to turn a pattern into a habit, because what happens is when it does that, it saves energy. And so, like he said, let me give you an example. One morning you get in your car, you're on your way to your office. Next thing you know, you sit down at your desk and you're like, how did I get here? Or you're traveling somewhere and that happens. What happens is that your mind creates a pattern that you become really familiar with and accustomed to. It's kind of scary. But you just wind up, it saves energy, and 9 times out of 10, you're thinking about something else while you're driving. And so he says, or another one is you told yourself that you were going to eat healthy today, you're going to order salad, and then next thing you know, you're standing in line, filling up your cup with Coke, and you've got your cheeseburger in your hand. He's like, and you didn't even really mean to, but just out of habit, because that's what you've ordered in the past, is what you go ahead and order that day. And we've all done that kind of thing. And so what they've done, this is kind of cool. I kind of ahead of time drew out this picture because I'm not a great artist. But he said they studied lab rats, and they were able to put sensors in rats' brains, which is kind of a weird sound anyhow, kind of weird process. And so they said they made one of the simplest mazes known to man for a rat. And what they would do is they hit the button, the gate would open, the rat would. He said, believe it or not, as simple as the maze was, the very first time it would take them 13, 14 minutes to find the candy, the chocolate candy that they put in the maze. And he said the cool thing was, because they had the sensors in the rat's brain, they were able to process its thinking pattern. And they said that as it was scratching on walls and everything, they could see its brainwaves was just like just peaking off the charts. And they said, and then when it got to the candy, it peaked off the charts again. And so, but they said the cool thing was, as they continued to do this with this same rat over and over and over again, they said what they noticed was that they, at the beginning, when they let the trap door up and let the rat into the maze, that trigger of the door opening caused the rat's mind to peak. But then, because it had done it several hundred times, as the routine happened, the rat just kind of, its brainwaves kind of bottomed out. And then when it got the reward, its brainwaves peaked again. And so what Duhigg says in his book, and what he determines about the power of habit is that the way that a habit is formed is by what he calls the cue, which is the something that causes the habit to begin. Then this is called the routine, which, like when you're driving in your car and you don't realize how you got there, the cue was you needed to go to work or you needed to go to the store or whatever, so you got the car. The routine is, well, I've always done this, I've always driven there, I know how to get there. But then when you actually walk away with like the chocolate, so to speak, that's the reward. And so he says, like, for instance, the cue could be for you, I want to exercise this year. Well, the cue would be to put your shoes by your bed so that when you wake up in the morning, you see them. That's your cue. The routine is kind of the monotonous of getting on the treadmill or whatever, lifting weights, that really doesn't do a whole lot for you. But he said, then at the very end of that, whatever that is that you're trying to create a habit in, you need to reward yourself. And he said, because it's the cue that gets you into the routine, that gets you toward that reward, and it's the reward that keeps you coming back. And so, and I thought this was interesting. He said, and of course for the mouse, it was the chocolate or the cheese. But he said, the virtue in itself, we say to ourselves, well, you know what? Like, let's use exercise again. He says, exercise, that in itself should be the reward, right? And I'm working out, I'm doing good for my body. But I like what he said. He said the virtue is not its own reward. You've got to reward yourself with something else. You've got to give yourself another reason. Like saying to yourself, well, I'm going to read X amount of books this year. Well, reading that book in itself is not going to be the reward. That's the routine. You've got to reward yourself. Every time you read one of those books, you've got to say to yourself, I'm going to go get myself a bronze or something like that. You've got to be willing to give yourself some type of a small reward. And so that's the first part of creating good personal habits and kind of how that looks. And so this is what's kind of where we move next. Is he talks about having a keystone habit. And what a keystone habit, by his definition, is this: it's a habit that triggers or a series of related, or in some cases unrelated, behaviors. In other words, he says it's the one habit, that keystone habit is the one thing that kind of, once you start working on that particular habit, it dictates and affects all the other habits that you want to create, that you want to have. And he says, let me give you a good example. He said there have been studies that have been done that have shown that families who eat together around the dinner table at night, it impacts their kids' study lives, it impacts their kids' spiritual lives. There's better family relationships and dynamics and that kind of thing. He said people who food journal, they are more likely, because they're writing down their calories and their intake, they're more likely to exercise better. They're more likely to, and I found this out in my personal life when I'm exercising myself, running and doing those kind of things. I tend to take better care of myself and my hygiene. I take care of myself spiritually better. I seem to be more in the Word and in prayer. I think there's a relationship that goes together with all those things. So that's what a keystone habit is. And so now that we talked about like why habits happen and how we can keep them, and how there's sometimes a particular one habit that can really dictate the others, we need to look at it in terms of, now, how does that affect the Bridge OKC and how does that affect our organization? And of course, I understand that Andy Stanley's teaching this, and he's talking about it in relationship to North Point Church, which is 15 years in existence, and they have some culture and all these kinds of things formed that come with time and longevity. And we'll walk through this, as the church grows, as we launch, as we move into our location, and we start to have more consistent meetings and things like that. We'll determine some more things than what we know now. But it's good to kind of process this, because when you think about having a habit as a team, having habits as a team, it's really hard to think about how does a team have a habit, But the way that Andy explains it is your team's habits are your team's systems, the things that you put in place that that you walk through as a team. He says not all systems are created. Sometimes systems happen over time. You don't even realize it. You just kind of get into routines because they work for you. And he said we got to be really careful about that too, because sometimes your routines aren't necessarily healthy all the time too. So we've got to really watch that. But in the book Thriving on Chaos, and Andy says it's a really long book that he doesn't know how anybody finishes. And that's big coming from Andy Stanley. But he says it's by a guy named Tom Peters. And he says one of the nuggets to pull out of that book, he says the driving force in the organization is that one thing that holds the organization together. And he says the scary part is if the organization doesn't know what the driving force is, then that organization is one dumb decision away from losing everything they've worked for. So this is what Andy says. He says we as an organization, again, this is where we're really premature in this, because we still don't really know everything about our organization other than what we want it to be. But he says we need to get into the habit of evaluating ourselves. And here, I love this too. He says, don't just evaluate what's dying what's not working. And he says, evaluate what's working. Do an autopsy on the things that are successful. He says, because when they fall apart, if you haven't done your evaluation, you won't know how to fix it once it breaks. Now, that was really kind of a big statement. And so we need to understand and try to figure out, and this is something I don't even know that today we could say, this is the keystone habit for our organization. This is the keystone habit for our team. But it's something we'll figure out really fast. Andy gives 6 organizational behaviors, and these are the things that are kind of the core values for the team. And they're on the list there. I'll go through them, but they're also, those of you that are watching here, I'm going to be emailing those to you as well. But he says there are 6 organizational behaviors, things they, as a team, collectively try to do is to stay fit, which that encompasses your health and spiritual fitness. Make it better. Determining that you're going to make the organization better. You're going to make each other better. You're going to be able to be, constructively criticized. Taking it personal, which is taking the mission and the vision personal and owning it, not just saying, okay, well, that's what the church wants to do. Saying, no, I am the church. I am going to make this happen. That's taking it personal. Replacing ourselves, collaboration, and then remaining open-handed. Those are the 6 things. And as we sat down and we began to kind of work through these also, we came up with 5 things, knowing that there will probably be more that come our way down the road. But we kind of changed some of the verbiage, and they're again on your paper as well. But we want to be all in. That's kind of one of our team values is as it pertains to the mission and vision of our church and this team. I'm going to be all in, and that means sometimes I have to help out in other departments. I have to help out in other areas to make things work. I'm going to make it better. We liked that one. We're going to multiply ourselves. We don't really like the terminology of replacing ourselves, but the idea that training up somebody to do what we know how to do, so it's not just all on us. Investing in yourself. We believe that in order to better the team, we've got to better ourselves, and that's one reason why we're setting goals for 2015. And then, fighting for loyalty, determine that we're going to fight for this team, that, we're going to have the mentality that we may disagree on certain things in our staff meetings, but when we walk out of the room, we're one, and we're one team, one heart, one mind. And so those are our 5, I guess we're calling them organizational values. And so what we'll determine probably down the road next year, maybe this time we'll look back and say, okay, out of those 5 things, what do we feel like is our keystone value? What is the one that, like, if we get this one right, it's going to really dictate and help with the others. And that's the question that Andy asked his team is if every staff member would do which one of these, fill in the blank, it would potentially cascade into the other habits and behaviors. And so, Andy says their vision, which is, I thought was cool, is the subtitle to his book that we're going to read through as a team, Deep and Wide, creating churches that unchurched people like to attend. That's their mission statement for their church. And so he says, because that is the mission statement for the church, then they believe as a team that taking it personally, taking that vision personally would impact all the other habits. And I tend to believe that even though we aren't at that stage yet where we can say this is our keystone value, with our vision, and our vision is to see lives changed and fulfilled by the power of Jesus Christ, and to link arms with him as he renews our city. I think personally that if we took that personally and we said, okay, my mission is to see people's lives changed and fulfilled through the power of Jesus Christ, then what that would do is it would cause us to be all in, and it would cause us to change the way that we look at people. And here's the thing I've started reading Andy Stanley's book again, and in the introduction, I thought it was interesting. He said, in the success of our church is that in the beginning, we determined that we were going to be in the market of reaching unchurched people. And he said nobody else was doing that. And so we had a corner on the market. And I think in some ways, being in the buckle of the Bible Belt, we can say there aren't a whole lot of churches in the metro area of Oklahoma City that is focused on reaching unchurched people. Now, I haven't been into many of those churches, but I want to have that mindset that our goal, if that's our mission, is to reach people and see their lives change and fulfilled through the power of Jesus Christ, then you know, then we're going to be focusing on unreached people, not just in our departments, but every day when we go out to eat down there, when we get coffee at Cuffy's and Joe, or we're walking down 23rd, we're circling the buildings and praying, whatever it is, we walk, into King's Chicken, or we're parked at the four-way stop and there's a guy with a cardboard sign. We're going to look at those people as the people that God has given us. And so here's the thing, because we talked about the cue and the routine and the reward, Andy Stanley says for their organization, they tried to figure out, okay, if our keystone habit is to take it personal, because we want to take our mission statement of our church personal to reach unchurched people, and that's much in line with what we want to do. He said, what are some of the cues and what's going to be our response so that we can get a reward that we want to get? And I thought it was really cool. And of course, this is something that over the next several weeks and months I want us to dialogue about, and I think we can add more things. But I want to share with you Andy's as we're wrapping this up, just so that we can kind of know what direction to be thinking in. Andy says that they created as a team over a few weeks of conversation what they call the 3 knots. Okay? And the first knot was this. He said when someone says in a conversation, hey, how are things going? And someone says, things are not going so well. He said what they had determined was they were instantly going to say, I want to invite you to my church. Things are not going so well. Cue, not going so well. Routine, I want to invite you to my church. Why? Because the reward is, it's really multifolded. One is, people come to church. That helps out the organization. And then ultimately the goal is met because people's lives are changed, So he says that's the first knot. The first knot is things are not going so well. Or he said, I was not prepared for this. And he said, like for instance, you walked up to somebody, hey, I heard you guys had a baby. How are things going? Oh man, we were not prepared to take that child home, or we're not prepared, or my son has just turned 3 this year. I am not prepared for the terrible 3s or whatever, that kind of thing. Well, let me invite you to my church. And he said, the third thing is this: I'm not from here. He said that just shouts instantly, I'm looking for something. And so those 3 knots I thought was really cool. If we want to reach unchurched people in our daily conversations and we hear one of those knots, man, you know what? I want to invite you to the Bridge OKC. And this is something that's cool because not only can we live this out as a staff, but we can begin to train this and implement this and kind of put this into the hearts and minds of our people. Whenever you have a conversation, Andy calls it invest and invite. You invest in relationships, invite them to church. And so this is a side note, and this is completely different than what Andy was talking about, but I would love to see us, and we mentioned this yesterday over coffee, I would love to see us have some cues for the rewards that we want to get when someone says, you know what, I want to introduce you to my spouse, and it's someone of the same sex. Or, we got this email yesterday. We're really excited about your church. When you guys get launched, we want to come. My spouse and I want to come and check it out. And after looking at that person's Facebook, we realized their spouse is the same sex. So we're like, and I thought for me as a pastor on Facebook, my response was okay in the coffee house, but I don't want to be in the habit of responding that way in front of people. And so I told myself, I need to, when that cue happens, I need to go ahead and predetermine my response so that I get the reward that I want. Because the reward that I don't want is, well, you guys are anti-homosexual people, or you guys are haters, or you guys don't want prostitutes, or you don't want homeless. So we need to, I think in some ways as a team, because we're in a very different environment, we need to go ahead and pre-think our cues and what our responses will be to those cues so that we get the reward in the end that we want. And people know us for, being like Christ and responding like Jesus would respond, and loving others and being accepting of other people, not necessarily lifestyles, but other people. And so this happens for us personally, and that's why we had you, create the goals, the 7 things that you want to see happen in your life over 2015. Because if you want, it's simple. Like I want to lose weight is not a goal. I want to work out 4 times a week and exercise so that I can lose weight is a goal, because they have to be tangible and have to be trackable. And so the power of habit is saying, okay, well, here's the cue. Then, if I want to lose weight, if I want to exercise, then I don't know if that's going to keep recording. And so, if by chance, we want to create this habit, then we've got to understand, we've got to set up some cues in order to get to that habit. If you're dealing with, like a relationship issue, then my cue is every time that person calls, I don't hang up on them anymore, or I don't, like just wait 5 days to respond to their text message or whatever. We've got to have cues that help us to get into the routine that we want to get, that gets us the reward in the end that we want to have. And so that happens for us individually, but it also will happen for us as a team. And I think, the reality is, it's one thing with a few of us sitting in the office right now. It'll be a different thing when all of us are in the office in the future and we're working together daily. These core values of behavior within our organization are going to be huge, and that's something that we're going to have to create those habits, those right habits that help us to get the results that we want to have. And so, anyhow, I'm gonna just take a minute and we'll turn this off. And thank you guys for watching in. And if you have any questions or anything pertaining to what we talked about, feel free to either call or text me or Pastor Callie, or shoot us an email. And love you guys.